I am your host, Nicole Will, and we thank you for joining us as we navigate the world with your aging loved one. We are here to come alongside elders, family members, and the senior living community as we explore the world of aging and elder care with helpful resources, informative interviews, and approachable conversations. We get to do this together, so join us on our journey, and this is the willGather podcast. Today, we get to welcome Ellen Belk. She is the founding owner of Keep in Mind, the Silver Living Strategies. She is an innovative influencer in the aging space for nearly 20 years. She has a leadership role in the senior living industry and working with those executives and the frontline staff. She is the author and creator of the 360 system, an operational guide for long-term living operators. This one-of-a-kind team approach. She is a dementia expert specializing in holistic solutions, a motivational speaker, and a dynamic trainer and writer. Thinking of creating a safe environment at our home for our loved one is on our mind. What should we be looking for? And if we find that our loved one does need to move into a senior living community, what questions should we ask? How should we approach that? Today, we talk with Ellen Belk and answer some of those questions based on her own experience with her family and also her extensive career experience in the senior living community. We talk about that. We talk about making those decisions, what to look for, how do we communicate, where we've been, where we are going. Thank you for joining us, and here is Ellen. Hi, Ellen. Welcome. Thank you for joining me today.
Oh, Nicole, it's my pleasure. Thanks for asking me to be on this amazing platform that you have.
We had an awesome conversation. Gosh, was it like a month ago?
Mm-hmm.
And we could have talked for hours.
Yes, ma'am.
We really had some similarities in our passion for creating change and having really great conversation and talking about this industry, our older adults, what we see that's happening and changing, and all of your really great insight. What led you to this work? How did you come to this place?
Oh man, my story goes all the way back to when I left my broadcasting job. I was living in New York and I was a citizen of that city working in radio, actually internet radio, if you can believe it. I'm such an old fogey. I go all the way back to the precursor to Sirius and satellite radio. The place I was at, it was a .com, and we were internet-based radio. It was just, anyway, that was the height of the .com era.
Yeah.
So I was living an amazing ride. I was in New York, and then I was also a citizen of the city when 9/11, happened. And it rejiggered my entire thought on the world at that point. Mm-hmm. I was very far from home. I was a girl born and raised in Wisconsin. I had risen through my broadcasting career to a pinnacle where I was now hosting a innovative tech show in New York. So I had really hit my stride professionally as a broadcaster. And I left New York with the intent of using those skill sets and entering into senior living. I didn't make a conscious choice to go into senior living. I was purposeful about wanting to go into healthcare. In my mind, I thought I'm a communicator. I'd done it at a high level. I thought it would make perfect sense for me to be a spokesperson, like a hospital spokesperson. I thought that was a thing.
Right.
I quickly realized when I moved back to Wisconsin, I started to try to integrate into healthcare in general. Yeah, nobody got it. Nobody could get past that. I had covered professional sports for 10 years and I'd moved around, and it was such a disconnect. And this is about 2000 and late 2001, early 2002. So I just took the first job I could. And I became a warm body. I've told this story before. I became an activity assistant at a skilled nursing center in a tiny little town in the middle of Wisconsin. And I didn't know what I didn't know, but I absolutely could walk and chew gum at the same time. And I was hired. Mm-hmm. And I say that purposely because I didn't know that back then. I knew that I was now embarking on something new. I learned very quickly after being hired there that I was a warm body, but That being said, that actually worked for me personally, because when you're a reporter like I was, you're used to kind of running your own. You go here, there, no one's really micromanaging you. So my first entrance into senior living as an activity assistant, where no one was telling me anything, what to do, how to do it, actually really worked well for me, to be quite honest with you. And I'm a creative spirit. And I started doing things that I did in New York, quite frankly. I started introducing theater to these residents in both memory care, and it was a skilled nursing. And so, and they did open a memory care unit while I was in there. But that very quickly, I really only lasted in that role about 4 months, if you can believe it. That's my message, is that when you are a hustler and you are someone that brings innovation and creativity into senior living, I moved up quicker in senior living than I ever did in broadcasting, and I have a degree in broadcasting. So all of that to say, I then went on to hold different positions as in director level positions, both locally, regionally, and nationally. And I came up through the resident engagement side of the business, but because of the things that I brought to the table, it really opened doors for me. I was very much a part of training our salespeople, training activity professionals, obviously, but I also am training regional professionals. So that's where my speaking comes in. And I had grown over these 20 years. I'm entering my 20th year in the industry. I have gotten multiple certifications and advanced credentials, and now just a lot of street cred because of my time in the field. And in the middle of the pandemic, I thought it would be wise to leave my senior vice president position and start my own company. It is a company that I had started previously, but I was now relaunching it. And I'm a silver living strategist, as you've indicated. And that basically means now I am all in it to win it and and work to continue to use my voice and my energy to change not only the aging sector globally, but my friends with dementia, for sure. That's where my passion is. And to kind of just shepherd in this new group of aging people, these new silver citizens, I call them, be they the boomers that are coming in that we have to pay attention to. So I'm excited to be a part of that. I'm excited to be a part of the conversation and helping that look and feel a lot better than it does right now.
And give them a voice and create change where we see those needs happening. If you could distill down exactly what your company does for people, what would you say that it is?
The way I've established keep in mind is I've written a playbook, an operational playbook for senior housing operations, most notably assisted living and dementia care. That's the crux of my consulting. It's the premier portion of my consulting for long-term living providers. I also have a universal build and design certification, and I'm in the midst of getting my certified age in place specialist. That's a CAPS designation, because I am very well aware of the landscape. I know these boomers are going to want alternative housing, possibly most notably living at home longer. Who doesn't want to do that? Another arm of what I will be doing is partnering and collaborating with builders and developers and working with their existing clients on how to age in place in a friendly manner and use my expertise operations on how to make their home operational for them to age successfully. So I'm very excited about that. The other thing, again, with my expertise in senior living, with my 20 years of leadership, I am being courted by tech companies who are either inventing products or inventing services that they're trying to market to the aging space. So that's really been a fun part of this reinvention of myself, Nicole. These tech people are hungry. I'm hungry. They're full of creative energy. They just don't know what they don't know. And they need somebody like myself to navigate how to get their intellectual property into the aging sector. And that's been a real cool dimension of my business. So it's really those three work groups: the professional long-term, the developers who are trying to integrate, and then of course the developers who are builders who want to help people age in place. That's kind of my three-pronged reach right now.
Right. It's been really exciting. Don't you feel like in the last few years there has been such an influx of technology companies that are making and creating products to meet older adults where they're at, whether it's in home or servicing senior living communities. So I can see how they have the background and the knowledge of the tech development side, not necessarily the background and the knowledge of the older adult care community side. And so they really do need that insight and oversight and information from someone that's had that operational experience, because there is a certain way you have to navigate what those environments look like. Don't you agree? Who
Yes,
to talk
definitely.
to, who to get things done, and how it functions. And primarily, I would say that there is a certain level of base functionality that exists in, quote unquote, you can't see my air quotes, in most senior living communities. The function and the work, what's the word I'm looking for? Demographic or operational flow, yes,
Yeah.
is generally similar. But it's figuring out what that is. So having someone to be able to speak on that and connect to that is really helpful.
Yeah. Well, and it's so fun for me because I had a couple meetings last week with just some really cool creatives, and it's such a, it's, it's the way the universe works. It's the way God works, that we're all where we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
You don't feel like it sometimes when shizzle's hitting the fan, but when at this stage of my career, which is a second, so actually this is like a third reinvention of my life. When I'm in front of these creatives and they're so passionate, it brings me back to my broadcasting roots, because I was fearless and I was in locker rooms and I was broadcasting on air to, over the internet back when nobody was doing that. So that's cool. And so I connect with them in that regard, that they're so passionate about what they're doing and they want to bring their thing, whether it's a product or a technology or an intellectual property on something. So I totally connect with that part of it, because I will say truthfully that as a creative myself who entered senior living 20 years ago, senior living isn't super creative and they don't always historically they haven't been, and they're not always super welcoming. So it's fun for me now to have really bulldozed through a lot of my 20 years in senior living that I've had to do, and kind of use that big voice that I have to just shake, rattle, and roll people to convince them that please listen to what I'm saying and use these creative and innovative ideas that I've got. So I feel pretty kind of cool about being able to help these new creatives that are so crucial to the growth of the senior housing market and the elder, space.
Yeah.
That they don't have to hopefully have all the doors slammed and the rejections. I mean, they're still going to have them, but I feel really passionate about giving them some kind of an inside behind the curtain, like you're talking about, a behind the curtain little, all right, I know that sounds good to you, sir, but let me tell you what's really going on is you're making that pitch to the people in senior living, and they're across the board. When I speak very frankly, they are so grateful, because I'm saying it in a way I'm not dogging what they're trying to do. I'm just saying we need to rethink your plan on how you want to get your product in, because no one's going to listen to you the way you've just presented that. We got to come up with the why. And so anyway, it's really great for me at this station of my life to be able to put my hand back and try to be a conduit to bring new creatives who are super much smarter than me, I'll tell you, and who are so ripe and ready to be infiltrating the elder market.
Yeah, there's a new energy. It's exciting.
Definitely a new energy. That's a really good way of saying it.
Yeah. Given all of your background, if we look at aging and let's say we're going to generalize it and put it in two separate camps, we've got aging in the home and aging in a senior living community. If we're starting at looking at the home and creating a safe environment, what should we look at first?
Well, and I love having this conversation because I think this is absolutely not across the board 100%. Nothing is absolute in life, but I do believe in the core of most people's beings, they do want to stay at home.
Yeah.
And I will say as a sidebar, not only am I a professional, I have aged friendly my parents' home twice. First, years ago when my dad had a dual diagnosis of Lewy body and Parkinson's, and my mom was his primary caregiver. And our goal at that time was also to keep dad safe in the home, that he shared with his wife of 62 years as long as possible. And so I did it from a dementia perspective, and we had great success. He was able to live successfully at home for 4.5 years until it got to the point of his journey where he absolutely needed the 24-hour care that a memory care community could afford, could afford him. And secondarily, after he, unfortunately, his journey ended. And then now my 92-year-old mother, who was living in that condo alone after, she benefited from how we had aged in place that had their home. So let's talk about that. So number one, as you assess your home, and this can be hard, I'm kind of going to appeal to the adult children at this point, if they are on, listening to your podcast, because we as adult children, listen, man, it's the hardest road to toe when you are an adult child who was raised by these parents that now the tables are flipping. There's possibly some resistance, but I do find that the resistance does tend to be that the elder wants to stay home, and the influencer, the child influencer, wants to get them out of their home and into long-term care. So that's maybe, again, not 100%, but that does tend to be the push-pull. Right. So as an adult child, I do recommend that you really do try to meet your parents, your loved ones, your grandparents, whoever it is that you're responsible for protecting. Meet them kind of where they are. Understand that ultimately the long-term goal might be to get them safely into a secured environment, assisted living, or even active aging adults where they're downsizing. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Yeah. So we have to listen first. So to age in place friendly, we have to listen to the people that we're trying to help age in place. Yeah. If they have a 3-story home and there's physical mobility issues, and they are refusing to go because their bedroom is up on the second floor and they're not able to navigate that, but yet they're heck bent on staying in that home. All right, we gotta reevaluate. Is there a way we might have to make the dining room into the de facto bedroom? Yes, we hear you, mom and dad. You want to age in place here. Well, you're going to have to meet me halfway as I work to meet you halfway. And for you to stay here successfully, we might have to rejigger our configuration of the home. So that's one thing. I don't mean moving walls. That, of course, is another option. And people are doing that, actually. They are actually spending time renovating. But for the purpose of this conversation, just assessing the safety of the situation as it pertains to the people you're trying to keep safe in that space. Yeah. The other thing that makes it challenging, Nicole, is there's so much life history in homes. Sally doesn't want to move out of her home because she's lived here for 60 years. Well, what happens when you live somewhere for 60 years? You acquire things. You have possibly, I'm a neat freak, but people have piles, or if you open a cabinet and 7 things fall out on top of you. Those are unsafe conditions for someone who's trying to age in place friendly. So again, difficult conversations need to happen where, okay, again, Sally, we hear you, we're going to support you, but we need to make sure that this environment, which has a lot of your lovely treasures, we want your treasures to work for you, not against you. So that might mean these 6 piles that are all up and down your hallway, which are impeding your safe movement from the bedroom to the bathroom. We're going to need to find a new place for these piles of treasures, Sally. Again, the safety is the key issue. Everything needs to start with safety as to how your person or your loved ones are going to move through the space. How will they navigate, again, clutter? So you're decluttering, you're assessing the space. The lighting, is the lighting appropriate? You can't have large swaths of darkness in the home, as people age. Now remember, aging is more than just numbers going up. Your eyes are changing, your hearing is changing, your stature is changing. So if everything is real high up on a wall, but I have osteoporosis and I'm hunched over and I'm 3 inches shorter than I used to be, you've got to recognize that too. If they're using a walker or some type of a cane or a device to move through the space, if you have throw rugs on the floor, get them out of there. If nothing else, if you have plush carpeting, I would invest in solid, smooth surfaces. I would get the carpeting out. Again, it's worth couple grand that you need to pay for that so that your loved one can move on a smooth surface with no impediments as they move through their space from room to room. Those are just a few things off the top of my head. I could literally do a half-day seminar on this conversation, and I hope to do that someday.
There is a lot to consider. And I loved how you referenced those things that get collected in the home right after 60 years as that term as a treasure, because it might not be meaningful to us, but it's so meaningful to them, and it represents a life lived and all of the accomplishments and the things that, went into making that house a home. But really, that's a good place to start. Is they want to age in place, and we're not quite ready to make that move yet. But let's look at how do we set ourselves up for that decision at some point. And if we do it in steps, and the first step is addressing, let's put things and pack things or rearrange so that when we maybe do need to make that change at some point, it's not as overwhelming where you have to go through the whole house or make big decisions about all of these treasures and what the loved one wants to do with them. There could be some mutual agreements or mutual choices on what do we do with this acquired life history that that we've had.
It is hard. And I just, again, my 92-year-old mother, I just fast forward to, again, during the pandemic, not only am I opening a business, but I'm moving her from Wisconsin to where I live, which is in the Carolinas. Yeah, I mean, even the wine glass that I had not seen, I guess I had seen it, and now as we're getting ready to decide, does it come or does it go? I mean, it got to that point, like, does this one thing come or go? Because you really do want the person to have the choice, obviously. Again, as adult children, we got to be super mindful that we don't start scolding and berating. We didn't like that when we were being raised. So you don't, definitely when you're making these cataclysmic, life-changing decisions, you don't want to be doing it in a place of duress. But I learned in that one moment as we're having the wine glass conversation that she had an old friend from a previous job that gave her that as a gift and had hand painted the flowers that were on that glass. So it meant something for her to tell me that. And I will tell you, when your heart is open, and then not every second of every moment of that move was going to go smoothly, make no mistake. There were times when I had to wait till she went to bed, and all of a sudden I'm like, okay, everything in the shredder, I need to start shredding. And I was always super respectful of giving her, obviously, this was her decision, and I wanted to work with her and meet her where she was. But there did come a point where we were having some paralysis by analysis. But at the end of the day, we've made a lovely home for her in her new apartment, and all of her that wine glass is there, and all of her most favorite treasures. And she, as time goes on, as you start to, one thing I will say to family is, as you gently massage this conversation, you don't want to be doing this after mom has the hip break and now she's coming home from they're deciding if they can let her go from the rehab, and does she go to an assisted living or does she go home? And she wants to go home, but you have to prove that home is safe for her to return to. Believe me, I've been through that too. They don't just willy-nilly let you take her home and hope for the best.
Right.
So the idea being is these types of conversations need to happen before the crisis happens. This planning needs to happen before the falls and the forgetfulness, the significant forgetfulness, or before they stop driving. You need to, these are conversations that, trust me, might be a little uncomfortable on the front end as the adult child trying to put the salvo out there, but you will be so much happier that you've at least started the conversation and started to put some processes in place before the crisis comes, and which it ultimately will.
I was recording a podcast the other day, and that was a question that came up. I was asked, as the host, it's always fun when I get asked a question about, have I made a plan of aging for myself, right? I'm younger, and obviously I haven't, because it's not something that is routine for people yet. We talk a lot about, do you have advance directives? Do you have a will? That is status quo in a way, but why not start creating plans that are status quo about what do I want my aging life to look like? Do I desire to be home, and what does that look like? And obviously we're not going to know that. It's going to change and it's going to ebb and flow, but making that conversation not as high stress or taboo, but a normal part of how we plan our life and our future, just like our finances and a trust and a will and things like that. What are your thoughts on that?
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I have crossed over number 50, so I'm into my 50s. Just had another birthday recently, so I'm now going to stop counting.
Backwards.
But I will tell you that absolutely, my husband and I, we don't have children. And so one thing I will tell you, that going through this with both my dad first and now my mom, Nicole, you talk about a wake up call for me. And I'm in decent shape as far as I know, but I did lose a brother at the age of, he was 54 when he passed away of a massive heart attack. So, and my dad had a quintuple heart bypass surgery in his past. So we have heart disease in our family. So I'm kind of acutely aware of that. And as going through this with my parents, and I'm flying back and forth, because again, I was a long distance caregiver and I'm cooking for them while I'm there, and all of this stuff that was happening, I just kept thinking, who's going to do this for me? Like, what's that going to look like? So to your point, absolutely. You know, we also have a trust. My husband and I did put a trust together. We also have finances and we know where things are going. I will tell you, we already are in conversations as a couple. We're going to build our next home, and we already have agreed. It, of course, will be a one story. It'll have flat surfaces. I mean, again, God bless my husband, I do this for a living. So but he knows he's going to get a bench in the shower that he can sit on, that we're going to build in, not just have like a chair in the shower. So he's excited about that, because he wants to sit down and wash his feet as he gets, now that he's over 50. But it's those types of, I know that sounds silly, but let me tell you something. Having an actual built-in bench where your feet can go under in and sit in the shower, you're going to extend your life, your safety in your home, because you can continue to do your self-administer your own care. But we also did mention, and to your point, I also don't know where exactly the future is going to go. But I even said to him, I would like us to have like almost like a build on off to the side of the house, maybe on the other side of the garage or whatever, like a small apartment, like a studio apartment that has an access door to our home, where and maybe we won't plumb out the bathrooms right now or put in the kitchen quite yet, but at least let's have the space there in our 50s, or this could take us until we're 60 to make this dream happen. But let's at least do that, so that when somebody needs to live on site and help us, and if that's because we're going to have to probably pay for that, because we don't have close family or relatives that would at all help that. So I already at my age am absolutely thinking about that. And again, it's because of what I do for a living. It's because at my age, I've already gone through this with my two aging parents. So you really do think about that as you do go through the journey. And I think what you just said is I love that we're talking about this, because quite frankly, I mean, we talk about, what vacations we're planning. We talk about, what investments we put in the bank for our children so they can go to college. This is just part of aging. And the idea that having these, you need financial fitness too, by the way. You need to that's always, everyone thinks that their money's going to last forever. I will tell you, truth be told, one of the things is, I'm just going to speak in full disclosure here. My dad, I told you he had a Lewy body and Parkinson's dementia. So it was a tough diagnosis. There came a point that the memory care community that my mom had chosen for him was being built. It wasn't done yet, but she wanted that one, and I was supporting of her. However, Dad's journey was progressing a little faster than she in her 80s was going to be able to maintain. At the very end, prior to his moving in, Nicole, we had him at about 18 hours a day of in-home care. When we moved him into the memory care community, it was over $7,000. I'm going to tell you that 18 hours of care, which we had to do for about 6 weeks, was significant leading up to the move-in, just to get him safely in there, cost more than the $7,000 for the month that we had to pay. Yeah, in-home care is not cheap.
No, it's not.
So again, that's why your home itself has to be, you want your home itself to work for you as long as possible. And with the technologies that we're talking about, there are things where there's medication reminders. You don't need up until this point, before this technology explosion, if grandma needed to take her medicine, you might need to hire somebody to come in and help her take her medicine. So and that's expensive. They don't do it for free. So I am a personal example because I wrote those checks. I mean, I helped, manage the money that wrote those checks. Mm-hmm. And I know we paid more for that 18 hours a day in his own home, eating, he was still eating his own food. No one was doing housekeeping for them. They were just managing his care and sitting with them in the overnights, and more expensive than the full-time 24-hour 365 memory care unit that he ended up being in.
And like you said, financially preparing for that, there's so much that goes into it for families to consider, for ourselves to consider, to think about. You're the perfect example because you talked about how during COVID, you had to make a decision to decide to move your mom near you. Was the COVID the catalyst for that, or is it something that you probably wanted to do previously, but making that decision happen? A lot goes into that decision, and it's deciding moving her near you into your home or moving her near you into a senior living community. What else can help make that transition more smooth? That is my first question, but on the same lines of that is, what should families look at when they're choosing a senior living community for their loved one?
Those are great. I will tell you, you kind of asked a semi-question when you asked, was COVID the impetus for mom moving closer? And you asked, did you want that to happen earlier? Yes, I did. Mm-hmm. When my dad passed away and mom had cared for him and she was 80, she's 92 now. I'm trying to do the math. I'm not going to do the math great in my head. She was probably about 88. She was 88 when he passed away. So do the math on that. She'd been caring for him since she was like 83. It was about 4.5, almost 5 years. She was aging exponentially because of her caregiving duties. So when dad had passed away, I knew there was going to be some time where we just needed quiet so for about the next year, she needed to settle into her new normal without her love of her life from 62 years in her home with her. Yeah. So she went to support groups, that's what I encouraged her to do. I wanted her to reintroduce herself back into society. But to get to the question, I did actually want that sooner. She was not ready. I have a situation where my mom was still driving. She was still very actively engaged. She's a very social person. And this was where I, as a person who has not been blessed with patience at all, ask anybody that knows me, I move fast, I talk fast, I want to go, go, go. This was a great exercise for me as an adult daughter to bite my tongue as best I could. I hung in there for a good couple, 2.5, 3 years. But in that third year, I before COVID, so this would have been like 2018, late 18 into 19, I was starting to have the conversation. So what I did is I did start to say, let's just talk about it. And let's just go look. So mom and I together, both back in Wisconsin and even here, and when she came to visit us, which she did every year for 4 or 5 weeks, I started to introduce her to some of these buildings with the idea that, hey, just in case. So that I think was helpful. Again, I'm going back to how we were talking about the home. As you're trying to navigate these type, if this, then that, you really always keep in your mind whether they're going to stay at home, whether you do believe that the ultimate goal is long-term living, or a combination of all of that, which is what I did, a combination of all this. We're going to make this work. You want to have the conversations, you want to make the adjustments to the home, you want to tour the communities or however you have to do that in a post-COVID world before you need to do it. Because as a senior living operator for 20 years, I'm on the inside of the operations, and I cannot tell you statistically, if I had to make a guess, I'd say 80 to 85% of all new move-ins into senior living are under duress and under stressful situations. So we as professionals are welcoming in someone that doesn't want to be there, that's coming from a hospital. The family is frantic. They're basically dropping them off at our front door and wishing us well. It is a craptastic way to start your life, that season of your life. Yeah. So I implore adults, start to have these conversations, even if it's to leave a brochure behind once in a while. It doesn't have to, you don't have to beat people over the head, but the preparation is key to that. How do you make the decision? Like you said, what are you looking for? Mm-hmm. In my case, I had a very, very social mother. I knew that. So why we decide, here's the other thing. COVID was ultimately the decider because she decided on March, like I remember, I always think that COVID kind of like launched in my mind, like on St. Patrick's Day.
It did.
I remember it being like that middle of March, like March 15th, 16th, right in there. Like the next day, the whole world was shut down.
Yes, it
So let's
did.
just go with that as my barometer.
And I remember that so vividly. I was supposed to fly to New York City that Sunday for a girlfriend's birthday. And we canceled our trip, obviously, because New York City was like ground zero for COVID. And so, yes, it's burned in my memory. It was St. Patrick's Day weekend.
So I will say that I don't remember what day of the week it was, but I remember that Monday of that week, Mom at that point, she was 91, had driven herself to her water aerobics class, which was a mile down the road at the Y, and was going to water aerobics on a Monday that she drove herself to. Fast forward to now, it's and then the next day, which was a Tuesday, she went to the senior center and played. I think they were playing, some kind of a bowling or whatever I should know this. What's the game where you toss it into the thing that's got the hole? Cornhole.
Oh,
Cornhole.
yes.
Shame on me. I'm a Southerner now. I should know that. Anyway, so she went to the senior center. My point in telling you even all of that is then COVID shuts down the world. Let's just say Thursday. Again, I'm forgetting the week exactly, what day of the week these things were. But now she's not driving. She's not going anywhere. Interestingly, during that experience, she sold her car. I get a phone call on a Friday saying, "Oh yeah, Ellen, I this, being at home like this and seeing what's going on in the world, I don't think I want to drive anymore. And I just sold my RAV4 for Over Kelly Blue Book to my neighbor upstairs for cash." This is my mother.
That's impressive.
It is impressive. And so again, so she's the one that finally saw the light. Now I'm thinking, wow, now I got to execute this game plan when the world is shut down. So thank you, Mom. We were just like 6 months, because she could have agreed with me 6 months earlier, she would have been here already. But anyway, neither here nor there. But my point is to families, back to your question, I share all that because, again, I want people to really know I am living what I'm talking about, and I'm super passionate about it professionally as well. Try to have these conversations, home versus, long-term living, long before you need to have them. Even if they're in passive conversations with brochures or driving by and commenting on how beautiful that place is. Maybe someday we should go have lunch there. Whatever it takes to get the seeds germinating in the heads in a soft sell kind of way, so that you're not making these decisions under duress. I think you asked me also, what then if the decision is made to long-term living is going to be the way to go, what should people be looking for?
Correct.
I'm going to tell you this, and I know, let's pretend COVID's going to pass us by at some point. So let me just speak as I used to speak pre-COVID to families, and I executed myself as well. If you decide that you want to start to pursue the pathway of going to investigate a long-term living environment for your loved one, I don't want you to call and set up an appointment with the salesperson to come at 2 p.m. on Thursday of next week. I know you're going to want to do that, but the challenge is, don't do that. And you might be saying, well, that's awfully rude, Ellen. Why would I not? Because remember, you're trying to help navigate a decision that's really going to be impactful on your loved one's quite frankly, last season of life. So if like I did, that my mom is very social, if I know that she's a people person, she's a mover shaker, if your person is not, if your person is more, quiet, which my dad was, by the way, we checked out a memory care community back in Wisconsin for him. That it is a beautiful brand. I'm very familiar with the company. I consider them to be a leader in the industry of dementia care, but it's like a 3-ring circus in that location. And we knew Dad was not having any of that. So we knew going into this that wasn't going to be a fit. So you want to be able to show up unannounced when you can do that, and we will be eventually able to do that. Even if you just knock on the door and let them know you're interested. Again, I'm kind of trying to go back to a pre-COVID. We have to start to go forward that these doors will open again, because believe me, they want to open their doors.
They do.
They want people moving in because they're hurting right now in senior living for that. Yeah. You want to see it unannounced, and because you want to see what life really looks like when you show up off the street and they're not expecting you. Trust me. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying that you don't want the dog and pony show that I promise you, here's an insider tip, I promise you, you get a dog and pony show when they all know on the inside that you're coming at 2 o'clock next Thursday. All of a sudden the building gets a little cleaner, the activities, everybody's laughing and screaming at the activities. And again, don't take this to say that no one, everything is bad and they don't only do good when they think you're going to come. It's not what I'm saying. There's unbelievably great operators that you could show up at midnight on Easter and they'd welcome you in for a tour because they have nothing to hide. Yeah. That's where you want to live.
That's good advice.
That's where you want to go.
Yeah.
You want to be able to see people when they are not expecting you and it feels like home and they're welcoming of you. And so that's one of my biggest tips. You also want to find out, again, depending on the acuity level of your resident, if your loved one has some extraneous health concerns, if your resident is going to need some, nursing care, you want to get a real good play-by-play of what that nursing care looks like. In assisted living, assisted living has full-time nurses. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that they go home at 5 o'clock and then if the shizzle hits the fan and your loved one needs help, is an hourly employee calling the nurse on the phone and trying to talk through that? What's that process? You want to know what the process is like when your loved one needs the care at any time of day or night, and get them to talk about that. And you'll get a sense of, they're always on call. Are they on call or are they in the building? Mm-hmm. And if they're not in the building, it's not the worst thing. It's not the worst thing if they're not in the building. But what happens when that wellness director gets the call at 2 a.m? Can she hightail it over here? Does she live an hour away? And now it is the hourly employees making decisions through the phone from her, making a decision that she's not laying eyes on. Yeah. You got to ask yourself, how comfortable do you feel with that? Right. So those are the two top things. I would show up unannounced and I would absolutely get a very clear blueprint of what the care style is like. And more importantly, what the crisis care style is like. Because ultimately at some point you don't want to be in crisis, but if they're going to be in crisis, you want to know what that looks like. And if it's going to be beneficial to your loved one.
Yeah. What's the protocol and what your comfort level is? Really good, important questions to ask. We know our loved one and we know generally what their needs are. What advice would you have if we're going to encourage them to use their voice to voice what their needs are? What's the best way for families to communicate this with senior living communities? Is there like a silver ticket that's the best way to navigate that?
Oh man, I love this question because I am currently living this question.
Yeah.
I'm having a little bit of a struggle with this one myself personally, in the location where my mother, who loves where she lives. I want to make that very clear, because she's back to being, engaged. She's can go down to the activity space or the movie theater that they have, or the gorgeous dining area. And she is back in her pre-COVID moving around. Now she's not driving anywhere, but she's engaging with friends and laughing and exercising her brain and her muscle. So I want to make that very clear. She is not complaining. But as her advocate, who has to pay attention to some of the nuances, I have not landed successfully with this particular group, I will say, because I have had to call, text, and show up before I can even have somebody respond to me. Yeah. So interestingly enough, professionally, this is giving me some real great fodder as I work with my clients, because I'm in the midst of trying to strategize what I can introduce into the industry that will implore senior living operators to realize, hey, not for nothing, this is a 24/7, 365 job. You may think you only work 9 to 5, but when you go home, the building is still alive and happening. So how can we communicate? So I guess, and so to answer your question, I'm going to really speak to your audience from my heart in that I'm strategizing right now what I need to do to have this community listen to me, or even to respond to me. So my first step for me personally, now Mom has been there over almost 5 months at this point. And I now am at a critical situation where it's like, okay, you guys got to respond. It shouldn't take me planes, trains, and automobiles and skywriting in the sky to get you to respond to a phone call or an email. So we have a cultural problem there. And when I say culture, I mean a business culture of the business.
Right.
They're not operating at peak performance, in my opinion. But that doesn't mean that their care staff, who are beautiful and love the care staff, make no mistake, the care staff in any senior living community, those are your rock stars. And my mom loves every last one of them. They're gracious and they're wonderful in her situation. So I hang my hat on that. I'll take care of the behind the scenes nuances that don't touch my mom. She doesn't even know who these leaders are that I'm talking about. Yeah. She couldn't name you the chef's name or the executive director's name, or she couldn't name any of that. So I like that she is living her fullest life. She's being cared for and tended to by loving, wonderful people that she adores, who also are very complimentary of her. But again, as the child who's kind of, we still do need to pay attention, and how do we communicate? I am going to be having a meeting. I'm going to ask for a meeting with this executive leader and say, we need to come up with a communication strategy. Yeah. So that's how I'm going to handle it. One of the things that, if you're a professional provider that happens to be listening to this, as I'm currently working on something right now where I want us, as your loved one is moving in and I'm the primary person, I want the community to ask the primary care family members, how do you want to be communicated with? Can we text you? Should we call you? Are there hours we shouldn't call you? And this is what's good for us. there has to be a communication flow.
Right.
I know from a technology perspective, and this is what's making me crazy about all this. There are so many, I could name 5 companies off the top of my head that are technology-based companies they're in these buildings. In fact, where she lives has one of these, and they're still not communicating via the technology that I know they're paying for operationally. So it's making me crazy.
Yeah, so is that a policy or a communication or a training loophole that just didn't get connected?
I believe it's a training loophole. And quite frankly, I think that's where senior living has a lot of opportunity to grow. Mm-hmm. They're resistant to change. I've said that from the first minute of this conversation. Mm-hmm. They don't welcome outside influences. Mm-hmm. Shame on them. Mm-hmm. I just did an interview last week where I said, I dare you. Think about Nike or Starbucks. Think about when Nike began a bajillion years ago with maybe 2 shoes. And now here in 2021, they have 100 brands of shoes? Starbucks, they might have started off as a coffee shop, but my gosh, look what they offer now in 2021. These are iconic, operational, legendary companies that have ebbed and flowed just to use your term, ebbed and flowed to meet the consumer demand. Guess what? Senior living hasn't come close to that. No. The buildings still look the same. Maybe the finishes are a little nicer, but we're still lunches from this time to that time, dinners from this time to that. You got to come to the dining room, and you got to, so shame on us. So this is what I'm excited for in this new dawn that's airing, is that we should be using technology, the technology that absolutely exists.
It does
where
exist.
You can, type a message there, there's a bunch of groups that do this. You gather the family's information as your loved one moves in. And then if some shizzle's hitting the fan and we need to say, hey, FYI, we've got 2 COVID, for example, to use real terms of what we're dealing with now, they could easily through an app send out, we've got 2 confirmed cases of COVID. We're sorry to report that now we're going to be on a lockdown for the next 14 days, or whatever their message would be. And that dings to my smart device immediately. Yeah. That's a way to communicate with families in the 21st century. If you're a senior living facility or operator that is 24/7, 365, and you got to communicate in real time.
I agree.
So with that. I guess, I got off on a little bit of a tangent there, but finding that flow, I hate to tell you, I say all of this to say I've got all the answers for the industry in general, but in my own personal situation with my mom, I have not figured out the answer there. So if any of your listeners have any suggestions, maybe they can reach out to me and tell them.
Let's email. We're speaking in general, big terms. There's a lot of communities that can get that communication done very well. Right. You spoke to that so accurately, is that it is going to be about technology, because we as a family are operating with our cell phones and our smartphones, and we do our whole life through that device. We communicate that way. We manage our finances. We make our appointment. Like everything that we do is on that device. We need to also be communicating with our loved one's healthcare provider the same way. And so it really is a challenge to how are we going to do that effectively and get everybody on board and do it successfully.
Well, and again, those operators that are resistant, and there are many, not all, again, there's some really great operators that are leading the charge on infusing good technology. And I'm not saying you have to have robots, which, by the way, robots are a thing. I've already consulted with one group that's using robots to get to your point, to get that phone to the resident room. It's interesting, but that's a whole nother story. So but I will say, if you just like I just used Nike and Starbucks, we wouldn't be saying their names if they didn't listen to what the consumer was demanding. So senior living, gut check time for them right now, because those operators that are refusing to, first of all, Nicole, invest in the technology that is going to be necessary to meet these consumer demands. Well, then they will be what's the word? They'll be voted off the island, to use a reality TV, old school reality TV show. Because no one's going to move in there. If they can't prove to the consumer that what's the plan and how are you using technology, and if it's crickets, well, good luck to you.
Right. And that's the question to ask, right? As a family member, when you're looking at a facility, okay, what technology is in place and how are you using it? Right?
Correct. Very good point.
One. Yeah.
Very good point.
Well, Ellen, thank you so much. This has been so great. We might have to do this again because I have a feeling we have a lot more we could talk about, but I appreciate your time so much. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Nicole. Like I said, I could talk to you. You are a kindred spirit. And so I really appreciate having you in my orbit. You are a fellow creative. Welcome to the tribe.
Yes. Yay. We'll do it. So I have to tell you about Jimmy Zolo and his new company, Joe and Bella. Our paths had crossed, and I'm so glad they did. It was such a pleasure to meet Jimmy. He is passionate about older adults. He told me that after both of his grandparents moved into a care community, his family's world was turned upside down, and they really became caregivers overnight. As you know, being a caregiver to someone close to you is often overwhelming. There's so much for you to manage, even with the support of a care community, like making sure your loved one has all of the products that they need and keeping them stocked when things run out, keeping inventory on what you have and what you don't. Jimmy also had that problem, and he was scrolling through all of these product reviews across the internet, and like most of us in the sandwich generation, we don't have enough hours in the day. It can feel really overwhelming and time-consuming and frustrating. We don't know what we're always looking for. And he wished there was a way to shop for his grandparents. Then the pandemic hit, preventing visitation to care communities, making this process even more difficult. So Jimmy decided to launch his own business to solve this problem. He founded Joe and Bella to make shopping for older adults simple. They carry everything from comfy clothes to creative gifts. They even have toiletries that can be automatically reordered and tech that makes caregiving easier. Everything all in one location. What I love, and I know you guys will love too, is that each and every product on Joe and Bella has been carefully selected by caregiving experts. Jimmy is so generous. He is giving an exclusive offer to our listeners of our podcast. You can use the promo code GATHER to receive 10% off your first purchase at joeandbella.com. That code is GATHER, GATHER, for 10% off at joeandbella.com. You don't want to miss this offer. Head to their website and check it out. Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed our episode, please subscribe and give us 5 stars. In all honesty, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening to our episode.